everyone, it's Shar here today, and I'm going to be making this fun New Year's card in today's video. So this card features stamps from a lot of different sets. I'm going to be using bears from Snow Much Fun. I'm also going to be using the little bears from Den Sweet Den. I'm going to use the smaller snowman and the top hat from Making Frosty Friends. I'm going to use some party accessories, those little party hats and the little party blowers from Party Animal, and I'm also going to use this champagne flute from Happy Wedding. So I have already loaded up all those stamps into my MISTI, and I'm just going to stamp everything on some white cardstock with jet black ink, because jet black ink is a Copic friendly black ink. And I'm stamping all those down, and I'm going to be doing some Copic coloring. Now I do stamp a second little arm for the snowman there and the top hat. And I realized I had a little bit of a glare on the tops of my markers, so I'm just going to list those at the bottom of the screen as I color all these little images in. I'm going to color both the top hats in the same way using two different shades of gray. And I like to use dark grays like this when I'm coloring something that's black. That way you don't lose the definition of the lines of the image, but it still looks like a black object. For the ribbons on the hats, I'm going to go in with a really dark yellow, very gold. The colors of this card are going to be black and gold because I think those are great colors for New Year's. For the champagne, I'm using a lighter yellow, and then I'm going in with a very pale blue to color the glass. And for the snowman, because he needs to stay white, I'm just going to line the inside edge of the image with a cool gray. So this just kind of lines it a little bit, gives it a little more definition, and then I'm going to go in with my colorless blender and blend out the line. Just gives it a little bit of shadow. Of course, I need to color his nose in orange like a carrot. And then for all my bears, I'm going to use some different colors of brown. This color combination that I'm going to use on this large bear is one of my favorite to use for these bears actually. And I'm starting with the E70, and I do not have that listed at the bottom because it was a little too light and I should have started with the E71. So as you're going to see, I'm going to go in with the E71 here. I'm going to color it like I am doing the shadows, but I actually end up coloring the whole bear in this color, and this will be my lightest color. So this is going to be my base color, not that E70 that's really pale. So it just depends on what color you want for the bear, but it was just a little bit too light for the look that I wanted for this card. So again, I'm going all over with that E71. That's going to end up being my lightest. And I really like this color because it's a brown that doesn't have a lot of reds or orange. It's kind of a taupey brown, and it goes with a lot of colors. So I'm going in with my darkest, which is an E77, and just going right around the edges, kind of underneath his belly and his feet. And then I'm going to go in with that mid-tone, which is that E74, and I'm just going to blend it out and give him a little more definition to his shape. And then finally, I'll go in with that E71 and blend everything out nice and smooth. Now those arms that are stamped above him, I need to color those the same way. So I'm going to start off with that lightest color. These are going to layer behind the bear. Then I'm going to go in with that mid-tone. Finally with that darkest right on the bottom, and then kind of blend it back out with that mid-tone, and then again to my lightest. So these are going to layer behind the bear. Now for the muzzles of all the bears, I'm going to keep it the same, this E00, so I'm just going to go ahead and color them all the same. But I'm not going to color all my bears the same. This little guy here, he's going to be building a snowman. I am coloring him in the same browns as the large bear. He's going to end up on the opposite side of the card from the large bear, so this will balance out my colors a little bit. And I'm just coloring him in the same way that I colored that big bear. Starting with my light, working up to dark, and then going back towards my light to blend out the edges. Now for the little guy that's sleeping here, who partied a little too hard, I'm going to color him as if he's a black bear. So I'm using those warm grays, and I'm starting with a W5 as my lightest. I'm going to use a W7 and a W9. Where I live, we have black bears instead of brown bears. We see black bears a lot more often. And I really like to mix it up and have the black ones with the brown ones. And then I'm going to color some with like a more reddish brown as well. So you can see I went in with that mid-tone. Now I've got the darkest, just putting it right where the darkest shadows are going to be, and then I'll blend them back out. And again, I like to use these grays not all the way to the darkest, because then you still see the lines of the stamped image and you don't lose those details like his eyes that are closed or just the side of his head. So for the other two little bears, I'm going to use the same color scheme for them. This is E23 and E25. These have a little more red in them. And I'm only going to use 2 colors for these. So I just started with my lightest, added a little bit of shadow, and then blended it out. And I'm going to do the same for this little guy here. Again, these 2 bears that I'm coloring in the same color are going to be on opposite sides of my card. So all my little gatherings of images, I'm going to have my bears all different colors, which I just think is fun and adds a whole lot more interest to your card than if they were all exactly the same. So now I can move on to my little accessories, and I'm sticking with that black and gold color scheme. So I'm going in with E23, which is a really dark yellow that's very gold. And then I'm also going to go in with a neutral gray. I'm going to use those same sort of colors on the little party horns here. I'm going to use the lighter yellow that I used for the champagne, for the one that's kind of curled up there, add a little bit of shadow. And for the other one, I'm going to go a little darker. So this one's going to look more gold. And I'm going to put some glitter on these in the end. So now all my pieces are colored, and I use the coordinating dies to cut them out. And now I can work on the background for my card. So I am making a slimline card today, and I am using the Scalloped Slimline with Hearts Landscape. So this is the smaller of the 2 Scalloped Slimline rectangles. I cut out a piece of Bristol cardstock that I'm going to do some ink blending on, as well as a piece of pixie dust glitter cardstock. And this is going to be my snow along the bottom. So I've taken my 2 main characters here, the larger of the images for each side, and I'm just sort of sketching in with a pencil where I want that snow hill to go. So the shape that I wanted for this particular card doesn't match up with any of the hillside dies, so I'm just cutting this one by hand. And you can actually erase the pencil line that if you still see any of it once you've got it cut with the scissors. So it actually works really well on this white pixie dust. So now to do the ink blending for my background. As I said previously, we're doing sort of yellow and black as the color scheme for this card. So I'm going to make this background all yellow, going from a lighter at the bottom to a darker at the top. So I'm starting with Squeeze Lemonade, and this is going to be the bottom of my card. And then at the top, the darkest color, I'm going to use Fossilized Amber. And then I'm using this little piece of paper to make sure that I don't get any fingerprints on my ink. On the Bristol cardstock, the ink sort of sits on top of the paper for a little bit longer, and this just avoids getting any fingerprints and leaves it nice and smooth. And then between the two, I'm going to use Scattered Straw. So once I get these initial layers of ink on here, you're going to see me kind of go back and forth between each of the colors to get the look that I want. So I'm going to go back to my squeeze lemonade and add more of that to the bottom to kind of close that gap between those two colors. And blend them together and you get a nice seamless line. It works best to start with a less ink and sort of build it up as you go. Making sure that I still have a bit of light at the bottom above my snowbank. And I've got the bottom looking pretty much the way I want it, but I want it a little bit darker at the top, so I'm going to go back in with that fossilized amber and just darken up those edges. Now I'm going to add some gold splatters to the background so I get some of that shiny glitz and glam. I'm going to be using the red gold from this Starry watercolor set because I think that's going to stand out the best on this yellow background. You can see how the yellow gold would match a little bit too much, and this red gold is a little bit darker. So I'm just adding water to this, getting it nice and soupy in here. I'm going to pick up some of that watercolor on my brush, and I'm going to splatter. Be sure to move the glitter cardstock out of the way. And I'm just tapping my brush so I get some of those big droplets. Now to add some smaller droplets, I'm going to take an acrylic block and I'm just going to flick the paint off the side of it. So you're going to get extra texture by having those large drops and the small drops on the same background. And I just love that shine that it creates. So I'm going to go ahead and add my snow to the bottom now that it's all nice and dry. And then for my sentiment, I'm going to use Finley's ABCs, and you can see I've already cut out the word cheers from some gold glitter cardstock from the autumn glitter cardstock pack. So I'm going to start to assemble some of my pieces. I'm going to start by putting my bear's arms on. So I'm just going to layer those right behind him. And then I'm going to add some of these accessories so that he's all assembled. So I'm putting that party horn in one hand, he's got a champagne flute in the other, and then that second top hat is his party hat for the New Year's Eve party. This little guy is going to get just a regular party hat, and he's going to be holding that fun party horn that curls up. I'm going to layer it behind him though so that it doesn't cover up too much of him. So you're really just going to see that kind of curly thing sticking out. And then, of course, the little black bear, he's just partied too hard and he fell asleep. The one that's over here building a snowman, I've got a party hat for him as well. And then I'm going to add that other top hat to my snowman. I do have some arms for my snowman. I'm going to add those here in just a little bit because I'm going to tuck those behind him once he's on the card. And you can see that that other little guy that is drawn like he's making snow angels, I think he looks cute like he's popping out from behind the snowman. So I'm just making sure I've got my placement for everything pretty good, and I'm going to go ahead and put my letters on. I'm not going to glue my images down just yet because I want to use some foam adhesive to pop them up, and I'm going to glue this to a card base before I do that. So I'm just making sure everything's nice and straight. I'm using my grid mat, and I'm going to start at the center of the word and work my way out. So I'm just using liquid glue to stick these glitter letters directly to my background. So now that I've got these all glued down, I'm going to put this on a card base. So a slimline card base is 3.5 by 8.5, and I'm going to put it on one that I've made from black cardstock. And now I can put all my characters back in their place. I'm going to be using some thin foam squares as well as some regular thickness foam squares so that I have some different dimension between my characters. So for this large bear, I'm going to use the thin so he's a little closer to the background. And then for the little ones that sort of layer in front of him, I'm going to use some normal thickness foam squares. And I'm just making sure there's foam squares on all those little pieces. I've got it on his feet, on the back of that champagne flute, on the back of the party horn, because I don't want any piece to be floating out there without some support behind it. So for the little guys here, I'm going to use a thicker foam square so that he's kind of popped up just a little bit more. So he's in the foreground. And then I'm going to do the same with the other little guy, making sure I put a square on the back of his party horn so that's supported as well. I like to make sure everything is supported with foam squares. So now I can move on to my snowman, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to put the thin foam squares on my snowman so that he's a little closer to the background, and that way the bear that's building the snowman can be popped up just a little bit more. It'll also give me some space behind him to tuck the other little bear. So I can glue this little guy directly to my background, tuck him behind there like he's jumping out, which I just think is so adorable. And then on the other little bear, I'm going to add regular foam squares. And I'm going to add a thin one where he overlaps the snowman. So if you have different thicknesses of foam, this really helps you give even more dimension, but not pop it up too terribly much. So for the little arms, to finish it off, I'm going to tuck this one behind him. And I had the thought of the little bear like holding his hand, getting ready to put it on, but I like it better already assembled, and he's just popping out to scare the other one or whatever he's doing. And then to finish it off, to add some more glitter to this, I've got some gold stickles. And I'm going to add that to the ribbons on my hats, as well as some of the details on the little bear's party hat. So to the stripes and to the polka dots and to the little parts on top of the hats. And then finally, I've also got some stardust stickles. So this is clear, and I can add that to the glass so you still get that shimmer, but you see the image behind it. And I'm also going to add some to the snowman. And then I'm also going to add some to the party horns. And then this is my finished New Year's card, and I just think it turned out so adorable. Those little bears partying and building snowmen, and it is so much fun. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.